Oh, thank you. Hello, everybody. My name is Latha Varadarajan, and I'm a professor in the Political Science Department and the director of the Center for International Security and Conflict Resolution. It's a very great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Thank you for joining us. This is an event that has actually been many years in the making. You see, a significant portion of our student body belongs to a generation that has grown up in a world that seems to be lurching from crisis to crisis, and a country that has been at war for almost their entire lives. And as this generation has come of age, the kinds of questions that they have started asking in my class, and also those taught by my colleagues, have taken on a particular sense of urgency. Our students have been genuinely concerned about the ongoing wars and the prospect of an even more catastrophic Third World War. They've been concerned about the nature of the threats that have made the 21st century a period where peace seems even more ephemeral than ever before. And they're concerned about the kind of political values that need to be defended today. In particular, they have become increasingly aware of the slippery slope we get on when insisting that securing of democratic values at home, at large, in fact requires a willingness to accept their undermining at home and at large. For them, the most pressing issue is trying to understand the struggle for a true democracy in this day and age. What is the role? What are the responsibilities of a democratic government, of a politically conscious citizenry in a time of war? It does come as a surprise, sometimes, at least to some of my students, that they're not the first generation to ask or attempt to answer these questions. In this country itself, decades before Afghanistan had the dubious distinction of becoming the longest war the United States have been involved in, there was another war, the longest war of the 20th century, that brought another generation to political consciousness. It was in the context of the struggle surrounding the Vietnam War that the questions of accountability of a democratic government came rather dramatically to the fore. In 1971, a young man by the name of Daniel Ellsberg released what became known as the Pentagon Papers, revealing government complicity in the web of lies spun around the long drawn-out Vietnam War. Ellsberg was charged under the 1917 Espionage Act, along with other charges of theft and conspiracy that carried a sentence of potentially up to 155 years in prison. The case against him was ultimately thrown out, not only because of governmental misconduct, but also in part because he had the backing of some of the biggest legal names in the country, and of course, the major mainstream press, in particular the New York Times and the Washington Post. Ellsberg, the most famous whistleblower of the 20th century, was eventually valorized as a hero, and his revelations have been seen as essentially contributing to the end of the Vietnam War. If one attempts to find a 21st century parallel to Ellsberg, it is impossible to overlook the name of Chelsea Manning. In 2010, Manning, also an intelligence analyst for the US Army, disclosed classified documents to WikiLeaks that revealed human rights abuses and corruption connected to the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. She was arrested, convicted, and sentenced to 35 years in a military prison before her sentence was eventually commuted in 2017 by then-President Barack Obama. Like Ellsberg before her, Manning has been denounced as a traitor by some and hailed as a hero by many. Her actions, as well as her treatment by the state, by the mainstream media, make it clear that the issues that concern the Vietnam War generation, indeed, are far from settled. Should the citizenry have a right to know what kinds of actions are being taken in their name? What are the imperatives of national security, and do they take precedence over all other responsibilities of democratic governance? What does political accountability mean in this day and age? Is the difference in the way in which the mainstream media has treated Manning as against Ellsberg a reflection of of the distinction in the cases, or a reflection of the state of the world at large and of American democracy in particular today? Today, more than ever, these are the kinds of questions that need to be asked and discussed in a free and open manner. It is a matter of particular pride that SDSU continues to be the kind of university that provides the forum for such discussions. I'm grateful to the Provost and especially the Norma Bouchard of the College of Arts and Letters for their staunch support in making this discussion possible. I would also like to thank the co-sponsors of this event, Love Library, the Institute for Ethics and Public Affairs, the Political Science Department, the History Department, Malice, and the Pride Center. And of course, a special thank you to our guest, Chelsea Manning, for being here today and her willingness to have this conversation with us, and our moderator, Professor Mark Wheeler, the chair of the Philosophy Department and the director of the Institute of Ethics and Public Affairs. Mark has also been the president of the CFA chapter at SDSU, and in his role as the president of the AAUP chapter at SDSU, he has been heavily involved in shaping our policies on academic freedom. So, without any further ado, I give you Chelsea Manning and Dr. Mark Wheeler.
Thank you, Latha. My name is Mark Wheeler, and I'm a professor in the Department of Philosophy and director of the Institute for Ethics and Public Affairs, and I'm pleased and honored to have a chance to have this conversation at SDSU. Let me tell you the format. We're going to have a conversation, and that'll last for 45 minutes or so. And then we'll open up the floor for questions. And at that point, you'll see there are mics and you can use those. Let me introduce Chelsea Manning. Here she is.
Hi, how's it going? Thanks for having me.
So,
Do it.
yeah. Daniel Ellsberg quotes you as having said you were ready to go to prison or even face a death sentence for what you were doing. So what did you think you were doing, and why did you think doing it was so important? And just as a follow-up to the compound question, did you think of your actions as acts of civil disobedience?
Oh, that's a lot of questions. Well, I didn't really, I really like Daniel Ellsberg, but I think that I didn't really, I didn't really understand I don't think anybody really understood the consequences of doing something like that in 2010 at the time. It never happened, nobody ever got in prison for this, and there was really no precedent for it. So I think that as a rhetorical point, I think it's more realistic for me to say that, honestly, I didn't fully, I didn't expect what eventually happened to happen. Like that was kind of beyond what I imagined would happen. I did think, I certainly thought I'm going to lose my job, get a dishonorable discharge, lose my benefits, and those are all bad things. Like if you're a junior, if you're an analyst, and you're kind of tied to the being a defense contractor later down the road. Like these are horrible things. Like losing your security clearance, really bad thing. Closes a lot of doors for opportunity. And I was more willing and prepared to lose that, even though I thought that was going to be devastating, in terms of like my opportunities in the future. That said, whenever it did happen, it seemed clear that I didn't necessarily fully know because it had never happened before. Now we all know what, you know, the possibilities are because it's happened, you know, so it's more, you know, I'm like, wow, you know, I don't know. It's just it's tougher to say because when you're 22 and you know you think you're going to lose your job, which you know, as somebody who was homeless for almost 8 months, you know, losing my job was like the worst thing in the world. So that seemed bad enough.
So I hear that at the time, at least, you weren't seeing the action as pregnantly an act of civil disobedience or as charged politically. I mean,
Right.
Given what we've seen, I think...
I was actually frustrated at the fact that, you know, because I went to the New York Times, went to the Washington Post, and I felt not listened to. I felt not taken seriously. I felt, you know, so, you know, I was just like, why is nobody listening to me? Why is nobody doing anything about this? Why is this so important to me and nobody's listening to me or caring about this? You know, because like we have been on, you know, like it wasn't just, you know, it wasn't just the war in Iraq, Afghanistan. It was just like the whole system and the what I was seeing and contributing to in my own work and in my own job every day. And I was just like, this is really important to me now. You know, like I went into this thinking I have a math background, and so I was doing statistical analysis, and I came into this from a very technical. You know, I have a technical background. Like I don't really, you know, I was interested in the geopolitical stuff more so than the technical stuff because I already knew the technical side of things. But I ended up, you know, sort of having this approach of I'm going to view this as a math problem to solve because, you know, that's what, you know, if you're a statistician, you're able to do, you know, statistics and come up with a prediction and an answer, you know, so you solve this problem. But you know, after being there for you know, several months, you realize that you know that there are millions of people and you know being affected by by all of this stuff. I'm seeing it happen, and you know these are people's lives. It's you know these aren't just statistical. These aren't just statistics. These are people living in a country that they are from, that they were born in, trying to live their lives every day, and you know all of the things that go with that. You know all of the best and worst parts of people, all of the fears and hopes and desires and connections and relationships and everything, and just the humanity of everything. And it became this very important thing to me. And I was struggling with trying to do something because it was important and dealing with that while also not being heard, not being listened to. And that was a very strong practice. Yeah.
So let me follow up on one thread there. What do you think is the scariest thing about new information gathering and distributing capacities?
Scariest thing I think is the fact that we're aware of the fact, you know, like we've gone through the mass surveillance debate, we've gone through the Facebook and Twitter spiel, but you know, awareness isn't the issue. We're not. It's not that we have an awareness deficit. People know that these systems are big, they're powerful, that they're dangerous, and that they're capable of doing really, you know, manipulative things, dangerous things, you know, and that you know millions of people all across the world are now being directly and indirectly affected by these systems, whether it's predictive policing or Google search results or Twitter algorithms, and it affects like your opportunities in different ways. So it's just. It's not that nothing's really happening. We're not really doing anything about it. We're not, you know, I think that there's this expectation that somehow somebody's going to fix all of this. It's going to be better, and like, wow, somebody should really do something about, you know, Facebook. Somebody should really do something about mass surveillance. And it never, you know, that's never going to happen. Like, you know, these institutions, they built these things for a reason, and they have no incentive to deal with with the results of them, because in many instances, the results of the system this is the intended result of it. You know, so we can't ask we can't ask, the National Security Agency to deal with the mass surveillance problem. We can't ask Facebook to deal with the social media, manipulation problem. We can't, because that's their job. It's what they do. It's what these institutions say they're going to do, in a sense, to their, more to their executive, more to their, to their shareholders, less to the public. But still, these are the intents of the system. And so I think that's what I think is the most dangerous thing, is the sort of complacency and complicity of inaction.
So the scariest thing is apathy or inaction.
Or an expectation that somebody's going to fix it for us. That it's not going to happen. We're going to have to do stuff. We're going to have to make it happen. We can't just ask for it to happen or hope it happens.
So this might be a good time to bring up the topic of resistance, the possibility of resistance. So we talked a little bit about this. The technology seems to offer a two-edged tool. Coercive power, but also possibly the possibility of resistance.
Right.
So can you talk a little bit about what you see there?
Well, technology is a tool. Your cell phone is just a tool. The internet is a tool. These are tools. They're neutral. They're not inherently neutral, because they're just. But if they're not being used by somebody, then they seem they're just a tool. They can be used in different ways. So these systems, these resources can be used in different ways, but it's not necessarily. It's a very abstract question, so I'm going to make it more, use more of an analogy, or something more immediate. I look at protest movements. You have facial recognition is a technology that police and some more general public. Some members of the general public that have really right-wing political beliefs might also take pictures and sort of pool together information about a protest, while also at the same time, protesters can take pictures of police and record instances of brutality, or instances of tear gassing and things like that. So the tools are being used by both sides, but I think there's an asymmetry in that. So that we're going back into sort of the more asymmetric aspects. But it's striking to me just the fact that we're seeing asymmetric warfare happening in the digital landscape here now, while we were watching it happen in other places before. So these tools sort of give us power as individuals and as a community, but they also give governments and bad institutions and really dangerous, corporate institutions, they give them power, so that, and there's this constant, expectation of an arms race, but really it's kind of not an arms race. A new technology will arrive that, helps protest movements, for instance, but another technology will come along, face recognition, that will be used to suppress that.
Let me shift gears a bit, kind of keeping a little bit more contemporary issue for you. The Institute of Politics at the Kennedy School of Government at Harvard University offered you a fellowship, and then rescinded the offer.
They asked me, they really asked me for it too. I remember they asked 3 times, I think, so we didn't get back the first time.
So they're hunting you down, trying to get you to say yes.
Yeah.
Right? And then they rescinded the offer after pressure from various sectors.
They announced it, and it became, they got criticism from a lot of intelligence agencies, I think.
So can you say a little bit more about how you understand what happened, how it relates to you in particular, and how it relates to the issue of deplatforming people in academia?
First off, I'll explain the story a little bit. So in summer of last year, I was asked to speak at Harvard and do a sort of honorary fellowship. You come in for a day, you do a thing. And we didn't get back to them first time because we had another event but it was a scheduling thing. So we finally got back to them. We're like, okay, we'll accept it. And it was just another event among several events that I was doing last year. And yeah, so it was sort of this unexpected thing. So they did the announcement, and then it wasn't until the next day that it was like a full day later before we realized, oh, they're going to cave on this. And as soon as they, because we didn't think it was an issue, and the school was reassuring us throughout the thing that, oh yeah, this isn't a big deal, we'll get through this. So we're like, okay, and then they rescinded it, and that just became this big deal, like in terms of like the media hopped up on it, and it was just like, it was very unexpected because it was from our perspective, it was one event among several events that was happening that year. But in regards to academia, like, one of the things that they said that the dean of the Institute of Politics told me in the rescinding conversation was that because like the other two people, there were two people. I can't remember Sean Spicer and some other the journalist who punched the guy and like the press person, and we're like, okay, like why are you allowing these two people to speak and not me? Like we obviously wanted an edgy lineup of people. And they didn't tell us that those were the other people. And so it was like, and it was actually an assistant of mine who basically asked what is the difference here? Like you think that that I don't have anything to bring to the table in terms of academic discussion. And he said, not in the same sense as Sean Spicer. And I'm like, I was just like, wow, like we hung up the phone at that point. We were just like, it was just ridiculous, and I think that's the problem is that when you have something to bring to the table academically and you're not able to, like, I think that's the problem. And the other problem is that on the other hand of things, you have people that have nothing to bring but hatred and really don't have any good things to bring to the debate or bring to the table. And I'm thinking of, like for instance, Milo Yiannopoulos or Richard Spencer go to they go to they just say edgy things at an event and protest. Like people rightly protest them. I mean, you don't see protesters at my events. You have these things, and we're trying to deplatform people who are inherently bad people that are not contributing to a debate. They're merely just spouting fascist propaganda. And so there's sort of there's two sides to that coin. So it's not that there's a good kind of deplatforming and there's a bad kind of deplatforming. So, but it honestly ended up.
Yeah, so you've had a chance to speak at a number of campuses.
Right. It really was just a blip. I mean, from our perspective, it was a blip on the radar.
I'm certainly proud of SDSU and the CSU for having a chance to host you. Thank you for agreeing to be here.
Thanks. Oh, we just did an event at MIT instead. Right about
Shut up. So let's shift to the topic of whistleblowing. I'll try to keep the compound question down to 3 parts.
Okay.
So generally speaking, what are your thoughts on whistleblowing and whistleblowers? But specifically, do you think citizens in a democracy have a duty to expose the crimes committed by a government, even if it is in the course of a war? And is there an important moral difference or other kind of difference between the role of a citizen and that of a military personnel?
The answer to the citizen versus military person is that there is no distinction between the two, realistically. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, Now then, as far as, I don't really use the term whistleblower. It's just, I find it to be sort of a very ethereal term, hard to describe or use. So I think that there are people who can expose that can expose things, and that I more view this as sort of like an act of direct action a way of, as an individual, doing a thing to resist an institution and an organization of authority, to sort of go outside of the bounds. I mean, there's this whole notion about, well, there's channel. Like I love this discussion about channels. There are channels that you can go through. It's a great rhetorical point, but there are no channels that you can go through in many situations. There is no safe channels, at least. You can go through them, but I mean, you're not going to be safe. I mean, Jessalyn Raddick is an attorney and a friend of mine, and she's made a career out of defending federal officials who have, from criminal charges, for going through the safe channels. Like they're actually weapons used against people. Like if you start going through them, you end up under investigation. So it's very, like she's had to defend people, and she's often, in some instances like Tom's Drake, she's even like they ruined Tom Drake, and Tom Drake went to Congress with something. So it's the safe channels rhetoric is completely nonsense. But going beyond that, I view it as a form of protest, as a form of direct action, where you go outside of the system. Now, that is the point, is to do something that is outside the process. So, you can't depend on, you can't ask, and then, this whole notion of like, whenever institutions can and do fail, and when they fail, you can't ask them to be better anymore. Like you have to go outside of that system. You have to go outside of that process, and this happens anywhere. Whether it's at a local level, whether it's systemic problems in our jail system, whether it's systemic problems in the military, whether it's systemic problems in the intelligence community, whether it's systemic problems at work. If you're working, I don't know, an office or something, or there's all these problems everywhere, but we can't depend or ask these systems to fix themselves. We actually have to do stuff. And that's sort of the debate that I have with like the AI stuff is, whenever we're dealing with algorithms, they're not going to fix themselves.
So you would encourage all of us to be aware of the case.
We all have an ethical duty, and if we're not doing it, and there's reasons why we wouldn't want to do it, but if we're not doing it and we can be doing something, I mean, we're in a sense complicit in that. There's an ethical complicity, I think, in being not just apathetic, but in being actively aware of something, and then being aware that you can do something about it, and then not doing it. I think is just that is to me a form of complicity in the thing. I mean, you can't really complain about the bad thing that you don't like if you're not doing anything about it, and you're in a position in which you can do something about it.
Let me circle back to this distinction between the average citizen and the citizen who becomes a member of the armed forces. You said you don't see a distinction.
I don't.
And so say a little bit more about why you don't.
Well, I mean, it's a job. I mean, we all have different jobs and different roles. It's not, I think that it's just a sense of like who your employer is. That seems to be the distinction that's made there. I understand the difference between, sort of your more, I always have struggled with like the notion of whether or not I was sort of in the military, because like I got the feeling like I'm a desk, I work behind a desk, and also like I was in the intelligence community, which is sort of a much more ethereal. I had worked with civilians, contractors. I mean, sometimes wasn't even uniformed, because the rank structure kind of gets muddled up in the intelligence community. So
So would you call for the abolition of the military system of justice?
I mean, certainly the military justice system has all, there's a conflict, there's an inherent conflict of interest when you're the employer and you're able to, dole out administrative justice in the form of, prison, or, I think that's sort of complicated. The sort of complicated relationship between somebody in the military, because they're both, it's the only one place in which you have both your criminal justice authority and your administrative authority in terms of your job are the same person. So it's very interesting environment. And and the United States has a very different approach than the rest of the world to it. A lot of like European militaries move their, if you do something wrong military-wise, they shift it over to a civil court to deal with it. I'm just saying that, we're kind of an outlier in having this conflict of interest.
So we talked a little bit about national security, and you said you wanted to make sure you had a chance to talk about the concept of national security. So let me pose the question this way.
Yeah.
Can the requirements of democracy be balanced with the supposed requirements of a national security state?
Well, what does national security mean? You hear a lot of people say, "Oh, national security, national security, national security," but they're like, let's look at an analysis of the term national security.
All my philosophy students, please take note.
Yeah. So, there's in fact a legal definition to it. So the definition is anything of and relating to the national defense, typically meaning the military and the Department of Defense, or foreign relations, typically meaning the State Department and relationships between the United States and other countries. That's a pretty vague, definition, and it encompasses an enormous amount of information. That definition keeps expanding every year. You just look at the number of people that get security clearances. There's Department of Education people who need, secret security clearances, and they never touch, they never touch, anything that's really sensitive, but they're still, for national, they're still considered as falling under sort of this national security, rubric. So it's becoming this like broad, expansive phrase that's used as an excuse to stifle, any conversation about a particular thing. Whenever you start delving into this debate about, what national security is, it helps to just, think about about how meaningless that term has become, and how, just looking at the executive order that deals with classified information, for instance, because it's anything, any information, any national security information that could cause X damage, meaning could cause damage, could cause serious damage, or could cause grave damage. And those are the definitions to classify something. Again, it's just a blank check for them to classify anything, because there's no real definition to these things. So everything ends up getting pooled in as being more and more. It just becomes bigger than the number of documents. And I think this is a problem with the apparatus that we have today. We have the largest military in the world. We have the largest prison system in the world. We have the largest incarcerated population. We have the largest intelligence. We have the largest and most expensive intelligence apparatus. We spend $600 billion a year on defense alone. And and you hear the debates, and it's like we need more. We need more. It's like we already have the biggest and the most, and yet we still. You hear from both sides of the political conversation about more, and it's like about which kind of more, as opposed to like whether or not we should be pushing back and rolling back, many of these institutions. And I certainly, think that we could do with a whole lot less, but that's another story.
Let's focus this specifically on surveillance and surveillance technology and how that, in your opinion, affects democracy in America.
Democracy in America. That's a subject in and of itself.
You had your toe though, okay?
Yeah. So government. We're also under corporate surveillance, which is this sort of privatized, surveillance that we sign up for. We sign, like how many terms of agreement have you checked? Have you hit on a checkbox in the last year? Probably a couple hundred without even really reading it. So we're turning over an enormous amount of information, and we're told about it, and we say, okay, here's all of my personal information that you need to do this transaction. Like you get a date, you get the time, you get a place, and we just need this huge electronic trail of everything that we do, every Starbucks purchase, every time we hit a Wi-Fi, every time you sign up for a free whatever. Chances are that if something is free, then you're probably exchanging your privacy for it. So it's very we have to be more cognizant, more aware as individuals, and I understand. I work at paranoid levels of security in terms of like how I secure my electronics. But that's not necessary for the average person. But I think that we should be more cognizant of what information we're leaving out there. I think that we should. If you're not using locational services, why do you have it on? Turn it on. And they make it hard. Some companies they have to go through like 3 different menus. But it's a good practice to get into. Because locational services, you're constantly beaming exactly where you are. If you don't need your cell phone on at a particular moment, turn it off. If you don't want to, if you don't want, to be giving out your personal information all the time, then withhold it. Say no, I don't want to give that information. Just be more cognizant and more self-aware. It doesn't mean that you can't. I have to turn on locational services sometimes because I get lost or I need a lift or something like that. Like I use these systems too, but I turn them off when I'm done with it. And I recommend that people be more self-aware, more cognizant of the electronic trails that we're leaving all the time. Because, it's there, and it doesn't go away. And it can be, the same tools that we use in marketing to track you and to identify you are being used to target you as a voter. And they can also be, in a wartime situation, be used to kill you. It's marketing for death, essentially. It's the same algorithms, the same tools, and the same way in which we track people. These systems are being used right now. Your credit rating, is based upon this huge trail that we leave everywhere. And that, the credit rating is used to keep you away from so many opportunities. It's used to police you. I don't know. Just think about it, especially just think about all of the forms that you fill out, all the little buttons that you hit. Every time you get a text message, that you have to like fill in the 6-digit code. You're giving out your location. You're giving out, tons of information about you every time you do that. And you're not just verifying that you do in fact have a phone, but you're telling, you're telling the world essentially something about you.
So not many secrets left for us, but the veil of secrecy at the level of the government or at the level of the corporation is sometimes impenetrable. And so, said like a true hacker. So,
they think it is.
So say a little bit more about the importance for each and every one of us to ask for a quid pro quo. If we're going to give up our privacy, then perhaps you might want to say that the bodies in question ought to give up some of theirs.
Yeah, sure. I think that institutions,
So the obvious counter-argument is that, well, some of these institutions need to keep this information for the sake of the lives of people who might be killed otherwise, or...
do they? I think that this is an assumption that's made a lot, but
Mm-hmm.
I'm 10 years ago, I would have taken the same position, but more and more, the more I think about it, the more I realize, has anybody, ever, they never actually prove it, they never say, like, oh, well, this is so important, and we can't reveal it. But like that just gets, the number of instances in which that gets used just gets bigger and bigger and bigger and more. It's used more and more as an excuse, and it's like an unquestioning. It is the argument. The argument is the answer. So it's like you can't debate, a hypothetical, theoretical. This is going to damage X because of I said so. I mean, argument by authority is what it is.
So, what do you think about the U.S. government's stance on surveillance, therefore?
No. I mean, yeah, I think that it's been shown that we don't need this, and if anything, we're creating a monster that we have no ability to control. I mean, and I think that's the thing that a lot of people in technology don't realize is that, not people in technology, but people in power don't realize, and I mean like in the corporate sense, like I look at Google and Facebook in particular, as well as government officials. They think they have control over this thing, but I mean these algorithms and these tools, that they're much deeper rooted than that. They're much, I don't think that people in power realize how little control over these tools they really have, and how powerful that they, in fact, are going to become by continuing to have them. We should have been having these debates 20 years ago, and we're already seeing the after effects of these tools leaving this gigantic, very hard to put together trail of social devastation all across the world. And we're still trying to wrap our heads around what happened, 10 years ago, 5 years ago, 2 years ago. And yet we keep, expanding these things. So I think that we should, put a halt to it until people in technology start thinking about the consequences. I mean, people in technology do think about these things. We're caught up in the design and development cycle where it's like we need results now. So we're trying to meet deadlines. We're trying to write software that fulfills the needs of some arbitrary criteria that our bosses send down in order to get it done faster, in order to get it done on time. And we lose sight of whether or not this particular tool has consequences that go beyond just the intended use. There's the amount of research that happens afterwards is actually very limited. It's usually only after a problem has been identified that research really begins. So you might have 5 years of damage from a project. It's a bit like it's almost like it's like drugs, and that's why I kind of feel like algorithms in particular, and these big data surveillance system, big database systems that include surveillance, but also are just like big pools of data that feed into algorithms. People in technology need to have a code of ethics about this and have because we are influencing the life decisions of millions of people, whether it be whether it be a credit rating thing or a criminal justice thing or a life and death matter in a war zone. These algorithms are impacting people, and I think we have an ethical obligation as people with technology to go through an analysis about whether or not a tool should be developed, even, or what caps we can put on it or what controls we can put on it. And I think that's something that we need to really think about is the consequences, especially the consequences that we should have foreseen, because we just get caught up in the design cycle instead of an ethical debate inside our heads.
Do you think it's technologically possible to put brakes on the machine now that it's roaring along so that we can have this pause and this moment for ethical reflection? And if you think it's possible, how is it possible? What's the trigger?
When do we take the time to think about that? And that's the problem, is that, we barely even think about whether or not these things are possible. If we don't think about whether or not they're possible, they're sure as hell not going to get built. So, I think that we need to slow down, and I think that people in technology, and I give this talk to a lot of, like Silicon Valley people, where I basically say, like, look, we all know based upon where we are, what we're working on, what the potential consequences of our system are. We should be communicating with others about that, and questioning whether or not we should be doing it, and whether we should be engaging in it. And we also can withhold that. People in technology, we don't have to write software all the time. We have the ability to withhold that, and I think that we can learn a lot from the labor movements of the 19th and 20th century, where we can take a thing that we have, which is our labor and our resources and our skills, and withhold that, to keep institutions from developing a bad system, or to keep them from implementing a bad policy, or something that's going to have irreparable repercussions for millions of people. I think we need to discuss whether or not we should be withholding some of our services.
So scientists help the public to understand the need maybe for nuclear disarmament. This was a really hot issue by coming up with the nuclear clock and talking about nuclear devastation. They had a worst case scenario to paint. What's the worst case scenario here? If we're looking at information technology and surveillance technology and the sorts of technology you're talking about.
I can get real sci-fi here.
Let's do that. I'll take off my glasses so I don't get blinded. Our AI systems are doing weird things. I've worked with Google TensorFlow. I've been working on some of this stuff. Machine learning is a powerful tool, and weird stuff's happening inside of it. It's weird stuff that we can take apart, we can look at, we can analyze. But often, when I look under the hood, I'm still scratching my head. And I know a lot of people that who will give you a long, frankly, bullshit answer about the fact that they understand what's going on in there. It sounds very scientific, but really, there's a lot of weird stuff going on in some of these algorithms, and with the output of some of these algorithms, they see things. These algorithms are able to predict things and see things that we don't know where the answer is coming from. We just get the answer. We're not really intuiting and picking it apart enough because we got an answer. We're like moving on to the next problem instead of looking at how we got that answer. So there's some weird stuff happening in algorithms, and I think that the biggest danger that I think that we're facing is when we lose control of our society to the algorithms, because the algorithms are in a sense in control of us. And I don't mean that with like an intent. I don't mean Skynet. I mean, I mean that I'm talking about runaway algorithms and algorithmic ecosystems in which we're already in an algorithmically driven society. But at what point does humanity, which we're a part of these feedback loops that are produced by the algorithms, at what point do we forego our control of our decisions and our society to the feedback loops that the algorithms are producing? And so-called expert systems.
I mean, it's not just expert systems, it's also the symbiotic relationship between one expert system and another. Like these systems work in an ecosystem. I mean, Google works in sync with Twitter, works in sync with Facebook, and all of these different algorithms determine how you make decisions in your life, and who you see, what Google search result you get, whether or not you're aware of a news story. Based upon your previous history, it determines what you see and what you're experiencing. So by creating these sort of bubble worlds, we're foregoing and allowing us to collect this huge amount of information that we as humans can never process, and giving it over to machine learning algorithms who can process it. We're essentially foregoing our control of our society to machines without even fully understanding what's going on under the hood. So I think the biggest danger is that we start to develop more super intelligent algorithms, and we just lose control, and we don't even realize that we've lost control. We think that we're in control the whole time, but we're not. I think that's the doomsday scenario. And I said I was going to
I should have put on sunglasses. I didn't realize it was going to be, yeah. How about a last question before we open it up? So when Ellsberg released the Pentagon Papers, he was hailed as a hero by some and supported by mainstream media outlets. That was mentioned by Latha earlier. And Snowden and Assange, more recently, and yourself are painted more regularly as traitors. And do you think this reflects an erasure of the democratic impulse, or how do you fathom that? What do you think the rhetoric is there, and what do you think the truth is there?
I'm going to take a step back. I'm going to say, the powerful people and powerful institutions, when they're faced with somebody who challenges them, and who says, who points the finger at them, or does something, or is against them, or is a threat to them in some way, they have words for you. And they get pulled out, real quick. Criminal, traitor, illegal, and undesirable, and like these things get thrown out real fast. They get thrown out as sort of labels by powerful people, and I don't see that as if John Bolton, decides he wants to call me whatever, which he has, then good on him, because he's just using a word. That doesn't mean anything. If anything, it tells me that I'm doing the right thing because I'm pushing back against somebody or I'm pushing back against an institution of power that really needs to be challenged. So in a sense, this is the language of power. This is what powerful people say. There is this relationship, this dynamic between I am the arbiter of who gets to say these words and who doesn't, because I am who I am. It's kind of made up.
Well, I think I'm going to hold off on the philosophical question that's first in mind now, because that might lead us down another rabbit hole. I see a lot of people here who've come and have listened, and I think it's a good time to open up the floor for questions. I'll ask that you please congregate your line behind the two microphones that you see in the aisles there. So if you have a question, feel free to step up to the microphones. Chelsea wants some water?
Oh, yeah, I got plenty of water.
Yeah, so we'll start with the gentleman here and the eggplant shirt.
Thank you. First, Ms. Manning, thanks for joining us. Professor Wheeler, appreciate the conversation. Found it really beneficial and interesting. First, I agree with your comments as far as privacy in the digital age, the necessity for being more aware, specifically with cell phone locational information. My question is this: you mentioned bad institutions. All cynicism aside, in your mind, is there hope for reconciliation as far as the citizenry and some of the institutions in America that govern us? And if I may follow up, you talked a little bit about bringing something to the table. So as far, if you don't mind sharing your senatorial campaign, what is it that you directly intend to bring to the table?
Well, I can't discuss the campaign at the venue tonight. I'm sorry, I'm not here for that.
I don't mind.
But yeah, on that first part, well, yeah, I mean, that's up to us. I mean, like, what institutions, what relationship we have with our institutions is up to us. I mean, if we say, oh yeah, this institution is terrible, and then just sit and do nothing, that's not going to solve any problems. But we in a sense have control over these institutions. We just think we don't. If we say that, like, hey, you know what, this is bad, and what you're doing is I mean, like, I mean protesting, and I mean like actually resisting them, not saying, oh, this is really bad. You know, like you can't, that's one of the problems that I'm seeing with a lot of activism, is that our relationships with power have been, like we've been led to believe, I think, somehow that holding up a sign and walking in a street for an hour and a half will make things better. I mean, that's not, like, that, like, they want us, you know, institutions of power, and I've sat in the conference room, you know, whenever a crisis happens. You know, so I know what brings people, you know, leaders and like the people within institutions to the table, and it's not whenever you show up with a sign. You know, so I think that we need to really examine the relationships that we have with these institutions in order to rein them in, and and I think that's how we can come to having better things. Is we have to actually, we can't just ask for it, we have to demand it. And that's not just, you know, standing around and hoping that things will get better.
Thank you for joining us. I just want to say that I have a similar background in military intelligence as you do, and I was actually in the service at the same time.
Hey.
It's just interesting for people like you to come out here and basically like how my idea of you has changed over the last 8 years from like, what the hell is, why did you do that? to now where I'm like, we totally need people like you to do this.
Right.
But, my question is, you're talking
Still tell your boss.
So my question is you're talking about deplatforming earlier. I was just wanting to dig on you a little bit on that, if that's okay.
Yeah.
My specific question is, when it comes to people, like I don't like Richard Spencer as much as you do, I'm sure. But when it comes to like just pushing him away and being able to confront his ideas head on, and then because I have a feeling, like my personal belief is that if you push it away, then people are going to be attracted to it because they haven't heard this before because it's cool and counterculture. But if you attack his ideas in public and discredit them, like the flat earth people, nobody takes them seriously, like except for the handful of people that believe in it.
I mean, I don't know, you haven't been on Twitter for a while.
But I just wanted your thoughts on stuff like that, like people like him, and who gets to decide?
You know, the people like Richard Spencer, they use these platforms to gain legitimacy, and whenever a university allows them this space to be debated, it gives these ideas legitimacy. It's not the same thing as having like, oh, I have an opinion, therefore I'm going to share this at my dinner table. Like, you know, it doesn't mean that we hand it doesn't mean we hand Nazis or white supremacists or, you know, anybody a microphone and say, hey, here you go, like, you know, debate your thing, we'll debate you. I don't think that's the appropriate way of dealing with these kinds of things. And I don't think that and you know, a lot of these things they're just meaningless talking points that they're used as a veil, you know, to you know, hide their, you know, obviously, you know, Richard Spencer, one of his things is like, you know, is that a lot of these people, they say, oh, I'm not a racist, or I'm not a white supremacist, you know, like, but, you know, like, they're hiding these sort of more nefarious, like, viewpoints and discuss, you know, like, things that are more whispered behind the scenes, and by having these people, you know, bringing them to a university campus, it gives them an air of legitimacy, which makes them far more attractive than if you shut them the freak down. You know, I participated in protests against these people. I will say that I believe in that. I believe that deplatforming them, especially whenever they're given a microphone, we can't give them a microphone, because as soon as you give them a microphone, it spreads like wildfire. And I think that, you know, you can't. And they just want to have a debate. That's all they say. They just want to have a debate. But if you let them debate, I mean, it becomes a nightmare scenario very fast. So that's my viewpoint on that. And it works. That's the other thing. Like, they're all, you know, like, I mean, Richard Spencer's not really doing anything anymore because we've shut him down.
Thank you so much.
No problem.
Thanks for being here and speaking with us tonight. And my question, from what I know, there were two basic things that you divulged. One was a video of military personnel shooting civilians who were trying to help others. And then the other was the State Department cable systems. Do I have that correct?
No, it's like $750,000 stuff.
Okay, but, do you see a difference between those two things, divulging one or the other, and do you think that, you would have gotten the wrath of the law on you as much if you had chosen only to divulge one rather than the other?
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter. But yeah, the point of this stuff is that it's there. It's there for you to see, and it's there for everyone to talk about. And the other thing is that yeah, there's no real distinction from it. From the standpoint of authority. Authority. Like the government says, oh, this stuff is classified, and because I said so, is all that it requires. It doesn't have to be, it can be whatever. It doesn't have to be any particular thing. It doesn't have to be, there's been instances where, where they just I've seen classified documents that should have never been classified. There's no way to justify it. And, but they'll vehemently defend it as it would be because somebody challenged that. It's more about again, argument by authority is sort of the whole, that's the whole basis of the classification system is argument by authority. There's a great Wikipedia article on it. Hey.
Hi, thank you for taking the time to come to the university and share everything with us. We really appreciate it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering if you can speak a little to your discussion relating to institutions and authority and systems, which seem very nebulous in the same way as you describe national security.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering how you see the relationship between this.
I can name names.
Sure. Well, yeah, the relationship between this political sphere and the current economic system. Talking about resistance. How does one approach merging these two areas through channels such as the Democratic Party, which seems to be very much a hierarchical structure?
Yeah.
So how can we use those existing institutions to bridge, if you get where I'm heading, towards politics and our current economic system? It seems like you're talking about these things in very nebulous ways that don't actually bridge to thinking about large-scale change, and how you see using an institution like the Democratic Party as a means of making any large-scale change bridging politics and economics.
Yeah, well, I don't think, I don't necessarily think that's the case. I don't think that, you can, again, you can't really ask an institution to fix itself. And so you can go
So I'm just wondering why work through a Democratic Party institution and to seek that change.
Well, because it's the only system that you have in the state of Maryland. I get where you're going with that, and I really can't talk about that. Again, there's rules.
Sure. So let's just talk about maybe existing party systems in general.
Yeah, why do we have a two-party system? Who made this decision, this arbitrary decision, where we ended up with a two-party system in the first place? And because it's always you always have to choose between, you get this thing, or you get this really crappy person, or you get this other really, really crappy person. So it's which is the less crappy person? And I see something fundamentally flawed with that.
That's
with
right.
that notion and with that system. I'm speaking more nebulously because this is such a, because this concept is sort of more universal than just, because a lot of people, they want to make it about naming a particular individual. And I think that, in our current political debate, the Democratic Party has a tendency of attacking one particular individual who I need not name, and then not really providing an alternative, just pointing the finger and saying, oh, that's bad, this person's bad, let's get rid of that person. And, but whenever their actual intent is merely to just get into power and then tread water for another however many years. I am being more nebulous because it's a more academic sphere. I can say it's the New York City Police Department, and it's and the relationship that people in Brooklyn have to that, to the arbitrary policies that they're implementing every day. I go out and I go out to some city, parts of insane neighborhoods in Baltimore, and it's a freaking military occupation. You've got cops with fucking AR-15s and body armor, just hanging out. Presence, they call it. They learned it from the IDF, and we don't. And that's another institution that we can talk about. So when I say institutions, I'm being more nebulous, not because I'm trying to hide something, but because these are universal concepts. And whatever institution you want to talk about, whether it's the NYPD, whether it's the Baltimore Police Department, whether it's the military, whether it's the intelligence agencies, whether it's the IDF, or the United Nations, like those are what I mean, or Facebook or Google, like that's what I mean by institutions. Sorry. Hey.
I do agree with you that big data has a big problem. You can do good and you can do bad things. And
Yep.
all the high-tech people, they have to learn how to be ethical. Now the question I want to ask
Well, some of us are ethical.
So, yeah, I read a book by Cathy O'Neill.
Uh-huh.
It's The Math of Mass Destruction. It talks about big data. It can do good and it can do bad. Now I want to ask you is that for what you know right now, would you do anything differently in a different approach?
I mean, I get this question a lot. I can't change the past. I can't. I don't have a time machine. I mean, my understanding of, but what I can do is I can change now. Is I can change what I'm doing right now. And I initially when I first, before I got out of prison, I thought I was gonna just go away. I was just gonna retire. I was gonna go home and just relax and try to live my life and live quietly. And I changed that real fast as soon as I started living, started being out here. I have control over what I can do now, and I can't go back in the past and relive every moment. Otherwise, I'm still agonizing over that relationship with Tyler. So that's a whole other story. Yeah.
Hi, thank you so much for being here and sharing with us. It's truly an honor to hear you speak. You said, and a lot of people have asked this question about institutions and system, right? And you said something about they can and do fail.
Yep.
So are we in a moment in which sort of project of the U.S. system, has it failed? Are we, can we just go ahead and say that? And I ask in part because the reaction to the things that you shared with the WikiLeaks and that,
Well, I shared it with you all.
and all of
that was
us,
the goal.
right, all of us. For a lot of people in the world, none of that was all that surprising.
Of course not.
For a lot of Latin American countries, for a lot of the countries where the U.S. has been so active since becoming sort of this global empire, they're like, yeah, we've known this for decades.
Yeah.
And so if we are in a moment where something is irreparably broken, do you think that this resistance we're talking about can learn and necessarily collaborate with the resistance movements that are happening all over the world to U.S. imperialism and military interventions and so on and so forth?
Yeah, that sounds like my politics workshop. That's a great question. This is what I'm asking. Like I'm not giving you an answer. I'm merely asking a question. Because it's not really for me to decide when an institution fails. It's for all of us. And what do we do at that point? We got to make a decision. As a culture, as a society, as a group of people. I mean, whatever entity you want to tell us. I mean, I just use we. I mean, I don't know. It's kind of ethereal. I mean, I use we a lot. Because I do mean more than me. Hey.
Hi. So this is maybe a question that's a little bit off topic of what we've been discussing, but I'm transgender, and I wanted to ask, a lot of transgender people have so many mental health struggles, and you have been in a lot of circumstances that have made that sort of aggravated, situations that any specifically trans people would be really scared to be in.
Yeah.
And I wanted to ask if you have any sort of advice or reminders or things that you would recommend that specifically trans people or other vulnerable populations take with us as we try to navigate those circumstances.
Yeah. Look to your left and right. Ask for help. We have each other. We have to be a community. I really I mean, I'm in therapy, so it helps.
Thank you.
You know, and if you can't get access to it, I mean, use that access. I mean, I've been struggling with keeping up with that, but I need it just as much as anything else.
Thanks.
Hi Chelsea, how's it
Hey!
going? Call that, but I'll try. You mentioned that you felt ignored by the mainstream media outlets when you tried to leak the documents themselves. Is that when you decided to use the platform of WikiLeaks? And how?
Yeah, I ran out of time, essentially, and they had the resources available, and it just was a confluence of instances.
Okay, so it wasn't like a decision to use that platform.
Well, I mean, it was like the platform of last resort, because it was like, oh crap, I'm saving some of this for the book, so.
Appreciate it.
And I tried not to plug, but.
Hi, I came all the way from Santa Barbara actually to see this, and I may have gotten a parking ticket, so. But
Welcome.
I know you mentioned reducing the amount of finances going towards national security and all that.
Yeah.
But
I mean, when I say that, I mean like 75 to 80% of bills or reauthorization bills that don't get debated on, that don't get discussed, they just get signed off on. They don't hardly any discussion about it.
For sure.
That's a starting point for a lot of this.
Okay, for sure. And in terms of like defense of democracy and all that, how can you defend your stance after the Russian meddling in the 2016 election? And is there someone to blame? Do we blame Facebook? Do we blame the government? Or do we blame our fellow U.S. citizens for not being, for being so ignorant about advertisement and the power of biased information?
I mean, well, I don't know. That's a good question, and I think that political systems are influenced by outside sources. I mean, the United States intervenes in elections all the time, all over the world. It's not an uncommon phenomenon. It's not new or unusual, especially if you look at more broadly geopolitically. Just ask yourselves why are these institutions so susceptible to all this content, different interests and interventions, and I think that. I think it's a failure of the system that we have, that it's so susceptible to this kind of thing. I don't know. I think it's up for. I think that we should spend less time worrying about who did what, when, and why, and how from 4 years ago. Work on how we can fix it now, because it's not gonna what's going to happen if we finally get an answer to a really. I mean, this is a complex system we're talking about. I mean, we'll eventually come down with some narrative about what happened. But it's a complex system, and there's so many different factors and influences. And we have to face what's in front of us right now. And if you think if you're worried about 2016, my goodness, what the hell are we about to face in the next 20 years? As these systems become more and more powerful, we need to be asking that question, I think.
Right, especially with Cambridge Analytica and all that stuff.
Well, I mean, they could say the Cambridge Analytica did exactly what its mission statement was. I mean, they didn't even hide it. It's just, I don't know why we'd be surprised if they're and that's the thing. It's these systems are really powerful and they do influence stuff. And and it's not just elections. And there's other discussions that need made about about how companies are surveilling their own people to find out their documentation status now. The predictive policing systems where you have hotspotting in communities where police end up getting told by an algorithm because they feed it data, they feed it all this data because they over-police a particular neighborhood, and then, so they get, based on that data, they end up patrolling that neighborhood more, having more reports on a neighborhood, which creates a feedback loop. Like, these are things that are also happening with very similar systems. They're really impacting people, and right now, and have been for 12 years now in some instances. I think that the debate is. I'm more focused on a broader debate, about the dangers of these systems, because as we're learning now, you all are learning this through news stories, I'm guessing, but I've been warning about this for 8 years now.
That'd be awesome. Thanks for the thoughtful answer.
Yeah. It's a little rambling, but I'll work on it.
Thanks for coming down.
Thanks.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hi.
I first just want to say thank you so much for being here, because you inspire people like me and my classmates and my family, because I'm going to school to become a therapist, but a big part of my identity is being an activist. And I think sometimes it's really hard to call out these systems because they are broken. And I think it's okay to call it out while being a patriot, because it's okay to love this country, but also call out all the bullshit that's happening right now. But my question for you is, I want to know more about your thoughts on internet censorship, and if there should be an entity that polices social media, because we see things like, we see things happening right now with, this last, there's been more than one mass shooting since this one, but the Parkland shooting, we see many websites posting false information on these children who are, fighting for their lives, and we see things like they're conspiracy actors and whatnot, and should there be an entity that polices what goes on the internet, and if so, would that be violating our First Amendment?
A censorship police force? I think that's a bad idea. It sounds like, and we already are doing that. Just look at what happened with Backpage. Backpage just got rolled up. The whole site got taken down, and they didn't even have the legal authority to do it. Nobody's talking about it. I have a real danger with institutions having the power to censor people. That said, whatever comes to some things, this is more of a community debate, and I feel like we can come, in certain instances, we can come together as a community and figure out what to do about a particular, set of information that may be right, maybe wrong. But whenever you start saying, about having the police powers to have this authority to be able to do this thing, it does start getting in, and it's not, it's not even about First Amendment territory, because that's almost gone at this point. So don't depend on the court system there. But yeah, I do have a problem with giving police systems more power to censor, and especially because it's usually arbitrary, and it's usually done in the interest of whatever system it's a part of. And if it's not now, then it will be one.
Thank you.
Hey, thank you for coming out to San Diego. I know running a campaign and doing a whole other things is a hard, doesn't give you the most spare time. But I actually have a question for your, when we're talking about whistleblowing and advocacy, how do you think that people who are outsiders can help someone like, for instance, Reality Winner, who was part of the intelligence community, who is now facing kind of the same scrutiny? How can we help advocate for people that are in that situation? I know you being their first person is actually more of a credible source. Can we do something? Can we advocate for something?
Yeah, it's up to the situation, but and who you are and what the issue is. I think as a former prisoner support is a big deal, because I got tons of letters. I got hundreds of thousands of letters while I was in prison. I think by one count, almost 300,000 letters. We're still working on the full number from the government. I did file a FOIA request. So, but yeah, prisoner support is important. Legal legal support is important. Raising awareness is important, but and it's not just one person. Like, and I'm actually doing this with J20 defendants right now. I have several friends of mine who I'm supporting because they went to a protest on January 20th, 2017. So they went to a protest against Trump, and now they're facing 61. It's 59 people facing 61 years in prison for showing up to a protest, for being associated with the protest in some way. And so, there's many parts, it's not just whistleblowers, it's also like anybody who's fighting these institutions, or anybody who is being out there, being an activist right now. We're all facing the gun right now. And so we all need each other, we all need to have, and I think what we can do is we can have solidarity with each other, because we can come together and as a broader unit, because like as a unified group, if we have people that are talking, undocumented people, getting rounded up like in huge numbers. We had the largest ICE raid, happen. I think it was like 80 people, that happened last week. I actually had somebody had to find that news for me because it's really a big news story. So, we have to have solidarity with the different political movements and come together and depend on each other, while also realizing that we're all getting hit from all sides right now. All the activist communities.
Thank you.
Sorry, a little rambling, but I think I got the point.
Hi, Chelsea.
Hey.
It's a pleasure talking to you today. I really appreciate you coming out here. My question is basically about the overseeing algorithms you were talking about. These algorithms were built by companies and governments, and computer programming hasn't really changed fundamentally over the last 20 years or so. And as we go into the 2020s, quantum computing is becoming more of a thing. So I was really interested to see how you respond to hearing about quantum computing and how you think it's going to affect the world we live in.
Oh, this is going to get technical fast.
You wanted that. So yes, that's exactly what I was looking
Yeah, okay. So I use Bayesian, I'm from a field, I worked with Bayesian statistics, the whole field of mathematics, with statistical, in developing like statistical predictive algorithms using Bayesian statistics, which Bayesian statistics being sort of one of the primitive algorithms in which, as you feed this algorithm more data, it learns and is able to make predictions upon that. Where there's been advancements is with deep learning, as it's been called, more of I use TensorFlow sometimes, which is Google's deep learning, open source deep learning tool. And it's based off of neurology. It's based off of not just for humans, but also for any kind of living form, the neurological connections that are going on. It emulates them and is able to, you're basically able to feed a processor and feed the software data, and it learns based upon that. And so I'm seeing we're seeing advancements in processing power. Obviously, the TPUs have just been, being rolled out by, Google's obviously hoarding the TPUs right now, but I think they're tensor processing units because it's specifically made for TensorFlow, the software for it. So, there's some really spooky, scary, deep learning stuff going on where you have some of these algorithms are learning how to compose music. It's wonderful and beautiful. Compose art, and it's wonderful and beautiful, and it's just incredible. Magenta, TensorFlow, which is Google's TensorFlow art project for algorithms to create art and some music stuff. It's kind of spooky. But yeah, there's been a lot of advancements to this stuff, and I'm just saying, the processing power is exponentially increasing, and the data collection is exponentially increasing. At some point, something really, if you think we're facing consequences today, I don't even want it. I can't even guess. Okay. I'm struggling to even guess what's going to happen in 2027.
Yeah, I totally agree. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, there it is. So let's all thank Chelsea for being with us.